Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you into a timeless question that has stirred hearts, inspired civilizations, and challenged human understanding for millennia. What is God? Some hear this question and look to the sky, others turn inward. Some seek scripture, others seek silence. And yet, in every corner of the world, in every tradition, and in every soul, this question echoes. What is God? God is not just a name spoken in prayer, nor simply a figure in religion. To some, God is the creator, the architect of the universe, the source of all that is seen and unseen. To others, God is love, justice, light, and mercy. God is the force that calms storms, not just in the skies, but within us. For the believer, God is a presence felt in the quiet moments, in the rhythm of the heart, in the mystery of life. For the seeker, God is a question mark that refuses to fade. And for the skeptic, God may be a symbol of hope, of morality, or even of human imagination. But perhaps the question isn't just what is God, but also where? Is God found in temples, mosques, and churches? Yes, but also in a mother's embrace, a child's laughter, a stranger's kindness, or the silence of a starry night. God may be the moral compass that steers us, or the unspoken strength that lifts us when all else fails. When we speak of God, we often rely on names, images, and descriptions shaped by culture, religion, and personal experience. Yet every time we try to define God with certainty, we encounter the limits of human understanding. God transcends definitions, not because we lack language, but because God is greater than language itself. The infinite cannot be reduced to finite words. The eternal cannot be confined within temporary thoughts. And the sacred cannot be fully captured by the symbols we use to point toward it. Across the world, people refer to God in different ways. Allah, Yahweh, Brahman, the divine, the creator, the universe, or simply love. Each name holds deep meaning, yet none can claim total truth. These names are not God themselves. They are our attempts to describe an experience, a reality, or a presence that often defies explanation. God is not a figure we can put in a box or a concept we can own. To do so is to shrink the vastness of God into something manageable, something predictable, something human. And that is not what God is. Throughout history, great thinkers, mystics, and spiritual leaders have reminded us of this truth. In Christianity, God is said to be I am, not a name, but an essence. In Hinduism, the Upanishads declare neti, neti, meaning not this, not that, implying that God is beyond all that we can describe. In Islam, it is taught that there is nothing like unto him. All of these expressions point to one central idea. God cannot be grasped in totality. When people debate about who God is or what God looks like, they often argue over images and concepts. One imagines a bearded man in the sky. Another envisions light, energy, or consciousness. But all of these are metaphors, tools to help our limited minds approach the limitless. They are not wrong, but they are not complete. Just as a single photo cannot capture the fullness of a person's life, no definition of God can capture the totality of the divine. This doesn't mean we should stop seeking or questioning. On the contrary, the mystery of God invites us to explore deeper. The realization that God transcends definitions should not lead us to silence, but to humility. It reminds us that our view is partial and that others may hold pieces of the truth we have not yet seen. It pushes us beyond dogma and into awe, beyond certainty and into wonder. When we accept that God is bigger than any one belief system, we open our hearts to compassion, understanding, and unity. At the same time, this truth invites us to live with reverence. If God is truly beyond definition, then every moment, every soul, and every breath could be a reflection of that vast, unknowable presence. It means God may be found not just in temples, churches, or holy books, but in acts of love, in nature's beauty, in the silence between thoughts, or in the courage of someone choosing kindness over judgment. To say that God transcends definitions is not to diminish our beliefs, it is to elevate them. It is to recognize that whatever we understand about God today may only be a shadow of a deeper truth waiting to be revealed tomorrow. And in that mystery lies the invitation not to define God with finality, but to experience God continuously in wonder, in humility, in love. When we ask the question, what is God? We are not merely seeking an answer. We are entering into a dialogue with the deepest parts of existence. For centuries, humanity has turned toward the heavens, the scriptures, the sciences, and the soul to understand this elusive, all-encompassing force. Yet the pursuit never truly ends. That is because God is not just a destination to be reached, but a journey to be taken. God is both the question that pulls us forward and the answer that gives meaning to our lives. To question God is not a sign of doubt, it is a sign of engagement. Every great thinker, saint, and philosopher who pondered the nature of the divine did so not with arrogance, but with awe. The act of asking, "What is God?" reveals a longing for connection, purpose, and truth. It is a question that arises in moments of silence, suffering, joy, and transformation. It echoes in the heart of a child looking at the stars and in the mind of a scientist exploring the origins of the universe. It lives in the prayers of the faithful and in the searching thoughts of the skeptical. At the same time, God is also the answer, not always a simple or comfortable one, but a profound one. Not always the answer that explains, but often the one that heals. When people face loss, when they endure injustice, when they celebrate new life or rediscover love, it is often the presence of something greater, something sacred, that speaks to them, even if it speaks in silence. God becomes the answer we turn to when logic fails, when the heart breaks, or when wonder overtakes us. And yet, the beautiful paradox is that the answer never ends the conversation. Instead, it deepens it. God as an answer doesn't close the door, it opens new ones. We may find peace in a belief, but that peace invites us into more questions. How should we live? What is our responsibility to one another? What does it mean to love, to forgive, to grow, to die? God is not the end of inquiry. God is what gives our inquiry depth. The more we seek, the more we are transformed by the very process of seeking. In this way, God is the mystery that makes life meaningful, not because everything becomes clear, but because everything becomes sacred. When we accept that God can be both question and answer, we begin to live in humility rather than certainty. We embrace faith not as blind belief, but as courageous trust in what we cannot fully explain. We see life itself as a conversation with the divine, where every experience has the potential to teach us something eternal. Whether one calls God by a name or simply calls it the force behind love, the intelligence of the universe, or the quiet whisper within, what matters is that we are listening, that we are willing to be present to the mystery, that we are open to the idea that the very questions we carry are sacred. Perhaps God is not found only in answers, nor only in questions, but in the space between the two. In that space, we find growth, grace, and transformation. We find our truest selves not by arriving at final conclusions, but by daring to ask, to feel, and to believe in something greater than ourselves. That is where God lives, not just in the heavens or the scriptures, but in the seeking heart, the trembling voice, and the quiet hope that dares to say, maybe, just maybe, God is here. When people speak of God, many immediately picture places of worship, grand churches, sacred mosques, quiet temples, or towering cathedrals. These spaces are important, no doubt, but they are not the only places where God dwells. The truth is, God is not confined to buildings, rituals, or specific doctrines. God is not limited by walls, symbols, or ceremonies. God is found everywhere, woven into the fabric of everyday life, present in both the miraculous and the mundane. God is in the rising sun that paints the sky with color, in the silent fall of snow on a quiet street, and in the rhythm of the waves crashing against the shore. Nature itself seems to reflect a divine intelligence, a design that speaks without words, the intricacy of a leaf, the precision of the stars, the birth of a child. These are not just scientific occurrences, but sacred ones. They remind us that life is not random. There is something holding it all together, something breathing life into every detail. That something many call God. But God's presence is not limited to beauty and awe. God is also found in sorrow and struggle. In moments of grief, when words fail and hearts ache, many find a mysterious comfort that cannot be explained. In times of despair, people often describe an inner strength that rises when their own has vanished. That unseen strength, that voice that says, keep going when everything else says give up, that too is God. Not always loud, but always present. We find God in relationships, in the way a parent looks at their child with unconditional love, or the way a friend listens without judgment. When someone forgives the unforgivable, helps the helpless, or chooses kindness over cruelty, God is there, not as a figure watching from above, but as the force moving through us. Every act of compassion, every moment of connection, every genuine smile shared between strangers is a reflection of God's presence in the human heart. Even in solitude, God reveals himself. In the stillness of the early morning, in the silence between thoughts, or in the breath that sustains us without effort, we come close to something deeper. Many who meditate or pray describe not just peace, but presence, a feeling of being seen, known, and loved by something greater, not because of who they are, but simply because they are. That presence is not manufactured, it is discovered. And once found, it changes how we see the world. If we truly believe that God is everywhere, our lives would be different. We would walk through each day with reverence, aware that every moment is sacred. We would treat others with dignity, knowing they too carry the spark of the divine. We would find less reason to divide and more reason to unite, because the same God that lives in me lives in you, regardless of belief, background, or identity. Recognizing that God is found everywhere does not mean every moment feels holy. There are times of doubt, confusion, and silence, but even in those moments, something stirs, an invitation to look deeper, to listen closer, to remember that we are not alone. The sacred is not distant. It is near, always waiting to be noticed. So look around, look within, listen to the quiet places, pay attention to the everyday miracles. You don't have to go far to find God. In truth, you've never been apart. God is found everywhere, not just in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary. Not just in the answers, but in the questions. Not just in the heavens, but in the here and now. Belief in God, when it is deep and sincere, does more than shape thoughts. It transforms behavior. It calls people not just to worship with words, but to live with purpose. Real faith is not passive. It does not sit quietly on a shelf, untouched until needed. It moves. It acts. It changes how we treat others, how we face hardship, how we see ourselves, and how we engage with the world. Belief in God becomes a fire within that fuels compassion, courage, integrity, and sacrifice. Throughout history, those with unshakable belief in God have built schools, hospitals, and shelters. They've stood against injustice, challenged empires, and served the forgotten. Their faith was not simply a private comfort, but a public responsibility. They believed that to love God meant to love his creation, to feed the hungry, heal the sick, defend the weak, and uplift the broken. These actions didn't come from obligation alone, but from the deep inner conviction that every life holds divine value. Belief in God reminds us that we are accountable not just to human laws, but to a higher moral standard. It urges us to ask, am I living in a way that honors the sacred? That question affects decisions both big and small: how we spend our time, how we earn our money, how we treat strangers, and how we respond to those who hurt us. Faith, when real, refuses to let us stay indifferent. It challenges selfishness. It confronts arrogance. It humbles us in success and strengthens us in failure. At the same time, belief in God offers hope that is bigger than circumstances. When people believe that there is a divine plan or presence guiding their lives, they find the strength to endure suffering with dignity. They believe that pain has purpose, that every trial can refine rather than destroy. This inner resilience is not just mental toughness, it is spiritual clarity. It empowers people to keep going when others quit, to keep loving when others hate, and to keep building when others give up. Faith also inspires forgiveness. Belief in a merciful God teaches us to extend that same mercy to others. Holding on to bitterness becomes harder when you truly believe in a God who forgives your own faults. People of faith are called to rise above revenge, to heal what was broken, and to restore what was lost. This kind of forgiveness is not weakness. It is power. It is the kind of action that can break cycles of pain and bring peace where there was once only division. Belief in God invites us to live with a sense of mission. Life is no longer just about personal gain or temporary success. It becomes about serving something greater, something eternal. It is sant po o priores. Whether through raising a child, helping a neighbor, or simply being honest in a world full of shortcuts, faith gives ordinary actions extraordinary meaning. It transforms everyday life into sacred service. This does not mean people of faith are perfect, far from it. But true belief does not allow them to ignore their imperfections. It leads them to humility, to repentance, to growth. It reminds them that change is possible, that love is essential, and that action is always more powerful than intention. In the end, belief in God is not measured by how loudly we speak of it, but by how clearly we live it. It shows in how we act when no one is watching. It shows in how we treat those who can give us nothing in return. It shows in how we rise, how we serve, and how we give. Faith is not just what we feel, it is what we do. Across every culture, every continent, and every era of human history, the idea of God has been present in some form. Though names, languages, rituals, and beliefs may differ, the yearning for connection with something greater than ourselves is universal. This shared search is not just a religious phenomenon, it is a deeply human one. And in that shared search, we find one of the most profound truths. God connects humanity. Not by erasing our differences, but by reminding us that beneath those differences, we are all reaching toward the same light. At the core of nearly every faith tradition is the belief in a higher power that created us, watches over us, and calls us to live with compassion and purpose. Whether called Allah, Yahweh, Krishna, Jehovah, or simply the divine, the presence of God in human life is a thread that runs through the heart of humanity. This shared belief provides common ground in a world that often feels divided. It reminds us that we are not separate tribes or strangers. We are fellow seekers, fellow beings, fellow souls. The teachings of love, mercy, humility, and justice appear again and again across spiritual paths. The golden rule, treat others as you would want to be treated, is found in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and many indigenous beliefs. This is no coincidence. It is a reflection of a deeper truth, that God calls us to recognize the divine in each other. When we see every person as a child of God, war becomes harder to justify, hate becomes harder to defend, and peace becomes a sacred goal. In times of crisis, people from different faiths often come together not because they agree on every theological point, but because they recognize something sacred in each other's efforts. When disasters strike or tragedies unfold, it is not uncommon to see people of all backgrounds praying, helping, and comforting side by side. These moments show us what is possible when we focus not on how we differ in our idea of God, but how we are united in our desire to do good because of God. Belief in God also helps break down the walls of ego and pride. It reminds us that none of us are the center of the universe, that there is something greater than our personal opinions, ambitions, or identities. When we humble ourselves before God, we are more likely to see others not as threats, but as equals. True faith encourages understanding, not judgment. It teaches us to listen, to empathize, and to build bridges where walls once stood. The connection that God brings is not limited to those who share our belief. Even among atheists, or those who do not adhere to a specific religion, there is often a shared respect for the values that religion promotes: kindness, integrity, service, and love. In this way, God becomes a symbol of our highest aspirations as human beings. God is not just a divider of people into groups, but a reminder that we all come from the same source and are heading toward the same mystery. When we forget this, religion becomes a tool of separation. But when we remember it, faith becomes a force for unity. It becomes a bridge between generations, between nations, and between hearts. God connects humanity not through uniformity, but through shared purpose. The call to love, to forgive, to seek truth, and to serve. In a world of growing tension and division, the reminder that God connects us is not only comforting, it is urgent. If we can look past the surface and see the shared divine spark in each other, we begin to heal, we begin to build, we begin to see not strangers, but brothers and sisters walking together on a sacred path. The search for God is one of the oldest and most enduring pursuits of humanity. Across time and cultures, people have looked to the sky, into scriptures, through meditation, and deep within their own hearts to understand the divine. But in seeking to find God, many discover something else along the way, something just as life-changing. They discover themselves. This is not a coincidence. The path to God often becomes the path to self-awareness, inner growth, and true identity. When someone begins to search for God, they are, at the core, asking profound questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of life? These questions, while directed outward toward the divine, reflect an inner hunger to understand one's place in the universe. The act of searching for God opens a doorway to self-reflection. It causes a person to examine their beliefs, their values, their fears, and their desires. In looking for the Creator, one begins to explore the created, one's own soul. This search often peels back the layers of the ego. The false identities built on status, appearance, or approval begin to lose their grip. In moments of stillness or prayer, people begin to notice the quiet voice within, the voice that has always been there but was drowned out by the noise of the world. That voice speaks truth. It reminds us of who we are beyond titles or achievements. It reminds us that we are more than what we do or what we own. We are something sacred, something eternal. And that realization alone begins to transform everything. Many spiritual traditions teach that to truly know God, one must first know oneself. In Christianity, it is said, "The kingdom of God is within you." In Sufi Islam, the poet Rumi wrote, "You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life?" In the Bhagavad Gita, the soul is described as the divine spark that connects us to the infinite. These teachings all point to the same truth, that in discovering our truest selves, we come closer to the divine. The search for God also invites us to confront our weaknesses and shadows. It is not always a comforting journey. It often involves facing pain, regret, and parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. But it is in this confrontation that healing begins. We learn to let go of what no longer serves us. We begin to see our wounds not as marks of shame, but as places where light can enter. In seeking a higher power, we become more honest, more compassionate, and more whole. What's remarkable is that as we grow in self-awareness, our understanding of God often shifts as well. God becomes less of a distant judge and more of a close companion, less of a concept to fear and more of a presence to trust. We stop trying to find God as if God were missing and start realizing that God has been with us all along, quietly, patiently, waiting for us to awaken. And so the journey that begins with searching for God often ends with finding ourselves, our soul, our essence, our purpose. It is not that we become God, but that we recognize the divine fingerprints within our own being. We come to see that the sacred is not just above or beyond, but also within. This discovery empowers us to live more authentically, more courageously, and more lovingly. The search for God is never wasted. Even if we don't find all the answers, we find deeper questions. Even if we don't find certainty, we find peace. And most importantly, we find a version of ourselves that is more awake, more alive, and more connected to something eternal. Living as if God is real is not simply about belief. It is about embodiment. It is one thing to say that God exists. It is another to live each moment as if that truth shapes your every decision, action, and intention. This way of life is not easy. It is the ultimate test of faith, character, and commitment. Because if God is real, then every word we speak, every thought we entertain, and every choice we make matters on a deeper level than we can comprehend. It demands that we live not just for ourselves, but with an awareness of something greater. To live as if God is real means to act with integrity even when no one is watching. It means showing kindness not to gain approval or recognition, but because it reflects the nature of a higher moral standard. It means pursuing justice even when it's uncomfortable or costly, because you believe someone beyond this world cares deeply about how we treat one another. It calls us to a higher responsibility, not based on fear of punishment, but out of love for the truth. This kind of living reshapes how we see everything, from our relationships to our ambitions. If God is real, then other people are not obstacles or tools for our personal gain. They are sacred beings, each carrying a divine spark. That realization changes how we speak to them, how we forgive them, and how we serve them. It reminds us to show grace in a world quick to condemn, and to offer patience in a culture driven by instant gratification. Living as if God is real also challenges us to confront our inner lives. It means examining our intentions, our attachments, and our habits with honesty. It's not about being perfect. It's about being accountable. It's about asking daily, am I living in a way that reflects truth, compassion, and humility? This inward discipline is difficult, especially in a world that encourages self-indulgence and superficiality. But it is through this self-examination that true spiritual growth begins. One of the hardest parts of this test is continuing to live as if God is real, even when God feels distant or silent. There will be times of doubt, struggle, and suffering. There will be moments when it seems easier to give in to despair or to act as if nothing truly matters. But those are the moments when the test becomes most meaningful. Faith, after all, is not proven in times of ease, but in times of difficulty. To still choose honesty when deception would benefit you, to still love when you've been hurt, to still believe in purpose when life feels chaotic. That is living faith in action. It also means seeing meaning in the mundane. If God is real, then ordinary life becomes sacred. The way we do our work, raise our families, or care for our neighbors becomes an expression of spiritual devotion. It is not just about big gestures. It is about small acts done with great love and intention. It is a daily practice, not a single moment. And in that practice, our lives begin to reflect something eternal. Living as if God is real is not a burden. It is a calling. It gives life depth, direction, and dignity. It challenges us to rise above our lesser impulses and to become the kind of people who build, uplift, and heal. It is a constant test, but one worth taking. Because through it, we not only honor what is sacred, we become more fully alive ourselves. Living this way may not always be easy, but it is powerful. It transforms us, and through us, it transforms the world.